Hi guys and gals, welcome back and happy Saturday. I wanted to do a video really quick on the pros and cons in living in Little Italy, Bronx versus Upper Eastside, Manhattan. I currently live in Upper Eastside, Manhattan, but I have lived in Little Italy, Bronx. You know what, I should have made this Little Italy, Bronx versus Upper East Side Manhattan versus Washington Heights Manhattan, because when I first moved to New York, I actually was living in Manhattan. I moved to Chelsea neighborhood when I first got here, and then I moved to Washington Heights. I lived there for a few months before moving in with my ex-partner. My partner at the time. I moved to Little Italy, the Bronx. Now, Little Italy in the Bronx is purported to be the real Little Italy because there are two here in New York. So I think the in Lower Manhattan. I don't know why my video does that. It just, it's annoying that it chops up. But so the one in the Bronx is purported to be the real Little Italy, and I lived there since from 2014 to 2016, so roughly like 2 years. It was interesting. It wasn't that bad, actually. The bad part, so I'll talk about the cons first. The cons of living in Little Italy, the Bronx, is that where I lived, it was like a good distance from the train station, right? So I remember that walk, getting to the train station and coming back. At the time, I was going to school. I was in a graduate program in Long Island, so that commute, that was a distance, commuting from the Bronx all the way. I see someone is trying to request to be in my video. Unfortunately, I don't have that capability for some reason. My video just messes up. So I encourage you guys, if you would like to interact with me, you have questions, comments, just drop them below and I don't have a problem answering them. But yeah, commuting from all the way from Little Italy, which the closest train was the D train. And I think the distance from my place where I live in Little Italy in the Bronx to the train station was a good, that shit was a distance. It was, I would say, at least a mile, if not a mile and a quarter. Which doesn't seem like that far, but it's that far like if you're trying to get somewhere, and like, let's say if it's raining, right, and then coming back. So at the end of the day, I'm done with my classes, coming back home, and commuting from Long Island, from the school I was going to, because I attended Long Island University. I would have to take a shuttle bus from the school to, I think it was the school from, the train station, and then from the train station I would take the Long Island Railroad, the LIRR, to Penn Station, 34th Street. Then I would have to take, what did I do? The A train, one of those trains at 34th, and I would end up having to transfer to get on the D train to get up to the Bronx. So it was a nice journey, but I just did it. I didn't think about it, right? I know sometimes people who drive, which there are more people who take public transportation here in New York than people who drive, but I know oftentimes they wonder, like, wow, like that's a commute. But it's just like, you don't really think about it, you just do it. So yeah, I remember those days just standing out in Long Island at my school waiting on the bus to come, and especially it was like freezing temperatures. It was so cold outside, but I just got used to it because for me, my motivation was the plan, which was to get my master's degree and graduate and move on from that. So I just kept my eyes on the prize, and I didn't really think about like the pain and suffering that I had to endure during that period. So yeah, it was a nice commute. And then, like I said, once I got back in the Bronx, like off the D train, having to walk from the D train to my actual apartment. Yeah, but living in what borough you live in, like walking, navigating through the streets, is pretty scenic. So you come across a lot. I remember passing by a nightclub and a lot of restaurants and a lot of parks. You know, I like to kind of walk past the parks and see the guys outside in the park shooting hoops, kids outside playing. So it's very energetic kind of neighborhood in Little Italy. Very family friendly, just down to earth people. A lot of shops. What is that street? Fordham Road, I think. Grand Concourse in that area. A lot of like, you know, storefront businesses that even if I didn't shop in them, it was just nice to kind of walk by and kind of do window shopping. So, yeah. But, yeah, the biggest con, I think, was the distance from the train station to my actual apartment. Another, I would say, it wasn't really too many cons necessarily living in the Little Italy in the Bronx. It was a pretty nice neighborhood. Like I said, it was like family friendly. It was a mixture. I know it's known to be like mostly Italian or Italian based demographic that live there. A lot of Italian restaurants, that's another plus. Good food, great pizza, great like lasagna and pasta. So I like that. Trying to think of another con. That's the thing. Other than the distance from the train station to my actual place where I live, I wouldn't say it was really that many cons living in Little Italy. The neighborhood itself, I mean, it was relatively quiet. It wasn't really too much happening necessarily, I would say, in the neighborhood from what I observed. It was just, yeah, it was cool. It was nice. It actually had like this, I think it was an annual kind of festival that will pop up near the street where I live, right? And I can't remember when, like what time of year it was, but they had like this Ferris wheel and different rides, and I was like amazed to see something like this just pop up in the middle of nowhere, given like a festival in the street, right? So they will block off the street. No one could drive down there. You only can walk, but yeah, they will put like actual festival like rides, like carnival rides in the middle of the street. I was just like, yo, only in New York. It kind of blew my mind. So I like things like that. It's very cultured. A lot to do, just very welcoming. And I would have to say that's for like all over New York. I always felt welcome here, invited. I felt like New Yorkers are really friendly, down to earth. They're very sociable. That's just been my experience living in New York, across the board, across all of the boroughs. So yeah, Little Italy, the Bronx, it was nice. The actual place where I live was a very relatively new building. Nothing really spectacular, I would say, about the design of it. I mean, the apartment itself was kind of spacious. It was a building that was designated for military veterans, and my partner, you know, at the time that I was seeing, he was a military veteran, so he lived in that apartment, and I ended up moving in with him. We were in love and all of that good stuff at the time. So yeah, but I would say there's a lot of good memories there. The food was really good in Little Italy in the Bronx. A lot of food options to choose from. The delivery was on point. It did not take that long for delivery to come to your house, like max 15 minutes, right? The places that I would order from were pretty much in walking distance, but you know, sometimes you just want the convenience of someone delivering your food for you. So yeah, I would place an order, whether it was pizza, pasta, hamburgers, whatever it was, and boom, it's at your door like in a matter of 15 minutes. They are very quick, right? Cost efficient. That's another pro to living in Little Italy, because granted, I wasn't necessarily paying rent because my partner was head of household. He was taking care of all the expenses. That's just how he preferred things to kind of be set up. So the rent, though, was inexpensive from what he was telling me, right? It was just like, I think at the time it was like $1,200 a month. Very inexpensive. Now, I don't know what the rent is now, but this was back in 2014. So, wow, it seems like it's kind of long ago. 2014, we're in 2022. God damn. That's like 8 years. Time flies by, yo, and this pandemic has like kind of fucked up people's sense of time, right? Because for like 18 months to 2 years, things were kind of just stagnant. And yeah, it was like, what day is it? Right? Because just kind of just waking up and still in quarantine, and businesses were shut down, right? Not too much was happening. So, but thankfully things are back on the up and up, and yeah, life is somewhat getting back to normal, whatever that is. So yeah, that's what life was like living in Little Italy. The people there, yeah, like I said, it was a mixture. So I remember like it being Italians, probably mostly Italian, some Hispanic, and some black, but I think predominantly it was Italian. They were very friendly. Like they just something about Italians and black people. I think we just get along. Like we're just two sides of the same coin. Um, so I think we kind of share in like kind of racial oppressive experiences too. So that's what kind of like makes it easy for us to connect. But it was really kosher living there. Now I live currently in Upper East Side, and this is a very interesting neighborhood. And I think I made a video on how I kind of discovered this place. It just kind of happened to me. It wasn't deliberate. It was just like happenstance, like kind of by proximity, where when I moved back to New York in 2020 after I had finished my doctoral studies, well, they kind of got like interrupted, right? So I was in my last practicum clinical rotation placement working at a prison in California, and the pandemic happened March 2020. So we were alerted that we weren't allowed to return back to our clinical site, and then I had to make a decision. Should I just stay in California, ride it out until the end of summer, or should I just pack up and leave? And I ended up just packing up and leaving, and I ended up coming to New York April 1st, 2020. And I'm happy that I came like when I did. The city was shut completely down. It wasn't really nothing happening, right? Everyone was inside. Everyone was inside, right? So I think that's where the phrase comes from, like, oh, we outside, because people have been inside for so long. So I remember how it was, and for me, I guess though I had lived in New York, right, prior to my return in April 2020, I wasn't that quite familiar, I would say, with like various neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs, and I was like kind of up in arms about where do I want to live? Should I live in Brooklyn? Should I live in Manhattan? Should I live in Queens? I don't know. Should I live in the Bronx? Like, where in New York should I live? I knew I didn't want to live in Staten Island because that shit's just way out there, right? It's just like its own place. So, yeah, I was really wrestling with that idea. And then what I ended up doing was I just started to rent like Airbnbs for 3 weeks at a time across New York. And that's a whole nother video that I said I'm going to come back and do. Let's see, I might do it next week. So what I got to do is basically go log into my Airbnb account and like write down the addresses of places that I was staying at when I moved back. But it was at least 5 to 7 different places where I stayed when I moved back to New York in 2020. And I was just like Airbnb hopping, right? Just for the fun of it, right? And also, it was intentional to give me a sense of where in New York I wanted to live. So I would stay like an Airbnb for 3 weeks and just get a feel of that neighborhood, right? Just the culture in that environment. I'm like, And then I would like book another Airbnb somewhere else. I was like in Brooklyn, Williamsburg, and Bed-Stuy, and I was in Jersey City, which is pretty much like 5-10 minutes outside of Manhattan. I actually booked the Airbnb in Harlem, New York, and that Airbnb was the kicker, right? It was a determining factor for what ended up bringing me here to Upper East Side, given that when I was looking on Airbnb, right, of course price was a factor. We want to like spend astronomical prices for Airbnb. I'm trying to remember what was my budget for 3 weeks. I cannot remember what my budget was, but I kind of guesstimate. I think I was paying like somewhere around $800 to $1,000 every 3 weeks, right? Because that's the length of stay that I was booking my Airbnbs for. I want to say, I don't know, quote me on that. I have to double check. I have to log into my Airbnb account to see. what was I paying? But from what I can remember, I want to say it was like roughly $800 to $1,000 for every 3 weeks. And of course, for me, just the look of the place matters, right? And so I came across a few Airbnb places in Manhattan that had exposed brick. And it was just something about the exposed brick that drew me in. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. And the pictures were nice, and I was happy to see, because sometimes you just never know, right? You can book a place, and the pictures are nice, and then you go, and you're like, what is this? But for the most part, every Airbnb that I booked, it matched the pictures, right? And so I came around to the Airbnb in Harlem, which was Spanish Harlem. And yeah, I showed up, I checked in, and it was nice. And I was welcomed with open arms. The owners of the Airbnb actually was, they were co-parenting. So it was a guy, basically, he owned the place, and his baby mama, she lived there. He didn't live there, but he owned it. And he had it so that she could have a place for her and their son to live. All right, I thought that was like nice. I think I talked about this too. It's just I think that was kind of inspiring for me to see how, in other cultures, I wouldn't just make a general statement, but it just seems like there is some kind of racial differences when it comes to, first of all, the ability to be able to financially afford to put your baby mom and your child up into a place, right? And to take care of them, like, that's kind of like man's responsibility. But somehow, some people miss it, right? Unfortunately. So, I thought that was nice. What was her ethnic background? She was Colombian and Jewish. Very nice woman. I think she was like a couple years younger than me, or in her mid-20s, right? And, yeah, they had it worked out where, he owned the place, but he allowed her to kind of manage the Airbnb side of it, like, doing the cleaning and just the kind of management of the space. It was a 3-bedroom apartment in a building in Spanish Harlem, and it was nice. It was clean. Cleanliness isn't really important to me, right? So it was clean. It was nice. She was inviting, welcoming. The neighborhood was cool. And so at that time when I was there, I'm like, okay, I've rented so many Airbnbs. It's time for me to find an apartment, right? Because I knew, like, I moved back to New York. I know this is where I was going to be staying. Before I left New York in 2016 to pursue my doctoral studies out in Los Angeles, I knew I was returning back to New York. No question about it. I actually had a storage unit, actually 2 storage units, in the Bronx with all of my things in it, right? So I left those things there, and I was paying monthly on 2 storage units while I was out in Los Angeles. Imagine the bill over the course of those 4 years when I was living out there in Los Angeles. I was still maintaining 2 storage units here. So I knew I was coming back, and yeah, it came around. I was like, it's time for me to find a place. And so I think I went to Craigslist. And I think on Craigslist, I saw where some properties were linked to Naked Apartments, right? It's a website that features apartment listings. And I had come across this management company, very nice management company. I come across several, right? But it was just this one that stood out because it had a whole, like, array of apartments, right? So, I saw the listing, I think, on Craigslist. It took me to the website, the nakedapartments.com. I'm not sure if Naked Apartments is still around, but it took me to nakedapartments.com where I actually got to see, like, the listing and the pictures and all of that, and the square footage, the pricing. And then it took me to their actual website, right? So I went to their website, and I just like the presentation of it. I like that they had, like, it pretty clear and set on what vacancies they had available, the location of those vacancies, the cost for each vacancy, everything, right? It was just laid out, pictures and all of that. And so I ended up contacting them saying, hey, they actually had several apartments that piqued my interest because they had so many options. And granted, remember, this is in around the end of summer, fall of 2020, right? So at that time, so many New Yorkers were migrating to other places. They were just leaving New York. It was like a whole exodus. But it worked to my advantage because at the time, real estate was down. So that means that, we had deals and we had concessions, and I reached out, contacted the management company, and I said, hey, you guys have several apartments that I'm interested in. I would like to do a tour. And they're like, all right, come through. I came through. I like their setup where they had it where you could just give them your driver's license, your ID card, in exchange for keys to whatever apartments you wanted to see. Now, granted, this management company that I am with, they have properties all over Manhattan, right? Well, for the most part, I would say Upper East Side and like Lower Manhattan. And yeah, and they were just like, let us know what address you want to see these properties and we'll just give you the keys. And I was touring like 3-4 properties at a time. And I like that it was more independent, right? The process of like searching for, like trying to choose which one I wanted, it was independent. I went by myself. I didn't have like an agent over my shoulder or the landlord saying, hey, trying to like influence my decision. Like it was just independent. And through that independent process, I got a chance to like enter each apartment, just take my time with it, right? Just walk in and just imagine myself in that space, living in that space, which to me is very important. If I can't like feel and imagine myself in a space, right, and I can't visualize, okay, how I'm going to put furniture, how I'm going to like, position couches and the chairs and the bed, right? So that allowed me to be able to do that, and then I ended up kind of narrowing it down to like, I think 2 different spaces, which just so happened to be in Upper East Side, because like I said, when I was renting that last Airbnb from that Colombian and Jewish woman, she had a cute little son too that lived there. It was a 3-bedroom apartment. Given the proximity, the area where I was at, I was in Spanish Harlem, and so of course when I'm searching, I was searching for places just close by, because I'm like, okay, this seems to be a nice neighborhood, right? Like I had lived in that space, even though I initially said I was like staying places for 3 weeks at a time, I liked that space so much where I was staying that I kept extending the stay. So I would say in total, I probably had stayed there, I'm pretty sure over like 12 weeks, right? This is a significant amount of time. And yeah, I got a chance to just check out the neighborhood and just see what was around. And I pretty much been all through like Spanish Harlem, through like Black Harlem. I'm like, this is nice. And so that's what led to like me searching apartments nearby kind of automatically, because I'm like, all right, I think I found my area. I think I found where I feel comfortable living. And then Upper East Side is just like an arm's length away from Spanish Harlem, so that's how I ended up here. And yeah, I guess I got connected and attached to the exposed brick that was in the Airbnb, and I'm like, I want my own place that has exposed brick, right? And it just so happened it worked out that way, where the management company had like most of the apartments have exposed brick. So I'm just like, I love it. So I love the neighborhood. I feel like it's a lot of pros. It's not that many cons. Okay, beginning with the cons of Upper East Side. I mean, it is Manhattan, right? And people have actually brought this to my attention. They're like, I don't see how you live in Manhattan. Because I was on a dating site, and the guy, I was telling him I live in Manhattan. And he was just, I think he lives like in Queens. And he was like, I don't see how you live in Manhattan because it's just too noisy. But it's like, that's kind of an assumption, right? People think, okay, yes, Manhattan is busy. It's the city. But people sleep here. Despite, contrary to popular belief that they say, oh, the city that never sleeps. But no, people sleep in Manhattan. We have to. You know what I'm saying? Like, people, there are families that live here There are bachelors and bachelorettes that live here. We work, executives, you know, that live here, millionaires that live here. And yes, people, they sleep. We sleep. So, at nighttime, it's quiet. Like, if you come to Manhattan, even come to Upper East Side, like, you'll see it's not as busy and loud as people try to think it out to be. So it is quiet. But yes, you guys can see during my videos, when I'm making videos during the day, that it does get kind of kind of loud, right? And boisterous with the noise outside. It is busy, you know, so it's a lot of commercial activity, right? It's a lot of sirens and sanitation trucks and just trucks and cars and horns, you know, and frustrated people trying to get where they're trying to get to. So yeah, that comes with the territory, right? And so you guys have seen, like, during my videos, people are honking, trying to get where they're, you know, and so you hear that, you hear all of these sounds. But I like the liveliness of this neighborhood and this borough, living here in Manhattan. Like, when I'm walking through the neighborhood, it's just, it's you can feel it. There's a vibration. The people are on the go. Just even sitting in my apartment, and I'm looking outside the window, and like, people are up early in the morning running, walking their dogs, and they're just so energetic, and they're just so motivated and driven. And I just like that energy. Is very contagious, because it reminds me, like, there's always more out there to pursue, to achieve, and you don't have to become complacent in your current situation and stuck and just not working towards anything, right? It's just always a constant movement and flow of people trying to excel and better their lives. And so that, to me, is very motivating. It's inspiring, and I'm surrounded by that. I'm surrounded by people who are relatively successful compared to, like, the general population, and they do have higher incomes. You look at the median income of my neighborhood, it's over 6 figures. Like, people are doing relatively well for themselves financially here, and I feel like I'm in the right place. Character-wise, people are friendly for the most part here. They give me compliments, you know. Like, I like to wear colors. This is just me, right? So I like to wear, like, colorful things and African-centered types of clothing, and I've gotten so many compliments from people who aren't the same color as me, because the neighborhood consists of mostly white people. So it just, yeah, it makes me feel invited. It makes me feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. Now, I do see the contrast, given that I do like to frequent Harlem a lot, right? I like to go there. I go there frequently. I walk there. I like to get out. I like to be active and exercise. And I'll walk from Upper East Side, you know, to Harlem. And I see the stark contrast between the neighborhoods, the character of the neighborhoods, right? Even when I'm on the train, you just see the difference in how people are dressed, right? Given, of course, people in Upper East Side, they have more money. But it's like, when you're in that world, you don't see it. You only notice it almost like when you leave this world, right? And then you're coming into contact with other people from other neighborhoods, other zip codes, and you're just like, oh, they're dressed different, and you can just feel the difference in the energy. They seem like more down to earth, kind of, so to speak, right? Like, I've noticed this, and it's funny, I've noticed this, I think it was like last year. I'm just like, wow, I see the difference in the zip codes, of the character of the people in the different zip codes. Leaving Upper East Side and going to Harlem, and even going to, like, Brooklyn. When you cross the, you know, Brooklyn Bridge, and then, you know, you're in Brooklyn, it's just like, they're not like the people in Upper East Side. They, like, people in Upper East Side, they have been said to be, like, bougie and uppity, and, you know, I just, it's funny how I didn't see it until I left it, and it's, like, weird how I live here, and it's just like, do I fit? I would, like I said, I've said this before, like, I wouldn't call myself bougie necessarily. I just feel like people here, we enjoy quality things, right? And we know our self-worth, right? We value ourselves, and we, we hold ourselves to a higher standard, and we have, self-dignity. I think I'm still humble though. So I like this neighborhood. I like that it's family oriented. I like to see just like families. I like to see a man and a woman and the children and a dog. And I even made a joke with my coworker to say that even the dogs are like well kept, right? They are well dressed. Sometimes dressed better than me. That's a joke I made. But I mean, they're just to say like they're well taken care of, right? You see, like, they have these high-end coats that the dogs are wearing, and the booties, and even around, like, Halloween time, the costumes, you can tell they invested, like, a lot of money into costumes just for their pets. So it's that kind of neighborhood. Now, the con, I have to say, aside from, like, the bam during the daytime, is the food. Upper East Side does not have good food. Not in my book. Now, maybe in other people's book because they have a different palate in terms of their taste buds. But for me, the food, I feel like I have to, like, scavenge or hunt for good food here in Upper East Side. Which I've found some good places. Like Italian places. Pizza, not so much good pizza. And my thing is, like, this is the thing I have against New York pizza shops, because you walk in and you look at the pizza and you're like, okay, is this fresh? And they'll say, oh, it's fresh. It's not fresh. What is fresh to you? They're like, I say, you have to ask, okay, well, how long has this pizza been sitting here? When did it come out the oven? They'll say, oh, it came out the oven 45 minutes ago. 45 minutes ago is not fresh, sir. So that's the issue I have. Like, if I'm going to spend my money on food, it has to be of quality and it has to taste good, right? It has to be fresh. Otherwise, I don't want it, right? So, yeah. But there are places that I have found that do deliver to where I live in Upper East Side. A lot of those places, though, are in Harlem. So it's good that I do live kind of in somewhat close proximity to Harlem. Now, the delivery drivers, like, they be fucking peddling, yo. They be going. And there are places that you can order delivery, from places like that are located in Harlem, and you're living in Upper East Side. So it works out for me. I like my location. I can just walk a couple blocks over, and then I'm along the East River, and I get to walk along like that boardwalk along the East River, and just looking at the water. It's very peaceful, and it's just a couple blocks away. That's going like towards the east, right? Towards like First Avenue. And then if I go like west, I can go to Central Park. So I'm like literally like a couple blocks away either direction. I'm really in a good location. What else? There's so much. I mean, obviously anyone can tell you like Manhattan obviously has a lot of perks. That's why a lot of people come here. Even New York natives, they come to Manhattan to do fun things. There's a lot of museums in Manhattan that I've been to. The MoMA, the Museum of Natural History. A lot. I do need to check out the Museum of Sex. I haven't been there since I've been back to New York, but I think that's in Lower Manhattan. They also had, on the Upper West Side, they had a Michael's, which is a art store. And I used to go there. I used to just cut through the Central Park and go on over to the Michael's. But they closed it down. And I was so disappointed. So now I have to go to Chelsea. It's not that bad, though. It's a lot of pros. Another convenience of where I live is that the train station is just a couple blocks away from my doorstep. So I don't have to go that far to get to the train station. And the train station is relatively new, right? It's the Q train. And not only the Q train, but I also have the 456 train, which is in very close proximity to where I live. So it's a lot of pros. The biggest con I would have to say, lack of food choices that meet my preference and taste buds. But I see, because I do follow this page on Instagram called Upper East Side, and they feature a lot of like news happenings, new openings of restaurants, and it's a lot of restaurants opening here in Upper East Side, which is a great thing. I actually was able to participate in the protests of the mandatory vaccine mandate that they had issued for city workers. So I wasn't a city worker at the time. I actually work for the state now. But at the time, I just felt like, I wanted to participate and join in. So I was out there protesting against the mandatory vaccine for like the FDNY, the Fire Department of New York, the New York Police Department, the sanitation workers, like all of them, they were out there, and I was in the middle of that. And I didn't know that the mayor's, like the house, I guess, I don't know, does the mayor really live there at that house? But it's just like a couple blocks around from where I live. So that's where the protest took place. So like little things like that, it's just pretty cool. From what I understand, a lot of like dignitaries pass through here. Like literally I can look out my window and see, like, you know, when the dignitaries pass through, you see like the black SUVs, the helicopter, like all this kind of big to do where they block off the streets and things like that. So that's pretty, I guess, exciting. So it does kind of remind me of like when I lived in Hollywood, California, because when I moved to Los Angeles in 2016, I actually lived in Hollywood, California, like literally minutes away, feet away from the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And with that, you know that they have like a lot of those star ceremonies, right? So I got a chance to like witness a lot of those ceremonies and also just immerse myself in the world of the entertainment world. Going to red carpet premieres, like just all of the fun, exciting things. So I just feel good being able to live here in Manhattan. It's like a dream come true, though I didn't necessarily plan on it. I think just the universe just somehow just pulled me in this direction and said, okay, this is where you should be. So I feel very grateful for that. I have to remind myself, because sometimes we get caught up in like, oh, what we don't have, and not really paying attention and being grateful for the things that we do have. And it's, a privilege, I think, to be here, because a lot of people would die to live in Manhattan, especially where I live in Manhattan. Very nice neighborhood. The building is clean. Of course, that's just goes without saying, right? That's just a requirement. Shit got to be clean. I wouldn't say it's a high standard. I just feel like a standard of health and cleanliness when it comes to, my environment. No fucking pests, no goddamn rats. There are people who actually live where there's rats inside their apartment. Like, granted, we know there are rats all over New York City, no matter what borough, what neighborhood you live in. There are rats all over this shit. But not in my apartment. Oh, no. But granted, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to have to end this video because I got to go grab me some food and take care of some errands. But there were some, because before I actually signed the lease and before I decided, okay, this is where I want to be, and I signed the lease back in October 2020, I did tour some apartments in New York where, like, I'm walking through the apartment, and there's fucking dead cockroaches. And I pointed out to the agent, I'm just like, there's a dead cockroach. She was like, oh, that's not out of the ordinary. That's not unusual. He was like kind of trying to say like, oh, all New York apartments have pests. No, not all of them. Right? And then that reminds me that recently I've been thinking, like, it's funny when you live in a place, right? Like this apartment, I've been here since October 2020. Actually just renewed my lease last year. So this is like going on my second year here. And I love it. Like, you get attached to a place living there. But then on the same token, it's just like, I look around and there are more modern buildings than the one I live in. Granted, my building is like, I don't want to say hybrid between modern and antiquity, I guess. But they're like more modern buildings, and I'm just looking like, like the luxuries that they offer and seeing myself there. Like, for example, having views, like really nice views of the city, and more space. Like, we always can use more space, right? And having an extra bedroom. Like, I live in a 1-bedroom apartment now, and it's cool, it's good enough for me. but just, having more space and being able to have floor to ceiling windows just surrounded by like light, right, in my apartment, and being able to look out and just to see like the entire city of New York or Manhattan or whatever. That would be like really nice and optimum. And not only that, but I realized like, okay, when I'm coming right into my building, just having to like reach in my purse and like fumble for the keys, I feel like that's an annoyance. And so there are a lot of buildings around where I live where there's a doorman. And I'm like, maybe I think that might be my next step up. Like to move in a place that has a doorman. At least I won't have to worry about fucking digging in my purse for keys. On top of that, I would like an apartment or a condo that has like keyless entry where I don't have to use a key to get inside my apartment either. Just be able to, I don't know, press my finger against a button and it opens, right? Or just type in a code on the keypad and voila, right? So that's what I've been thinking about. But yeah, I love living here in Upper East Side. Do I see myself moving out of Upper East Side? Probably not. Yeah, I don't, it's funny because it's just, that's the thing about New York. It's either you love it or you hate it, but once you're in it and you're like sucked into it, it's just like, it's hard. It's hard to leave. It's hard. It's just like, there's so many memories, and that's the thing. New York is so vibrant. It's just like, it creates like this imprint on you. And so you feel bad when you leave. It's like, oh, leave. Even if you're just moving to another borough or another neighborhood, it's like, right, and starting over. I thought about that, like, oh, what would life be like if I lived in Brooklyn, right? I lived in a predominantly African American neighborhood, which, funny enough, that was kind of like my idea when I moved back to New York. Okay, to be surrounded by black people, because I am an African-centered psychologist. If you guys haven't noticed, right, my dissertation research was on black identity, acculturation, and implicit racial bias. So, of course, that's something that I feel very passionate about, and that's the work that I want to really sink my teeth into. Yeah, and so like being surrounded by a bunch of kind of rich white people, I feel sometimes far removed from where my purpose is and where I should be, right? But for me, like I said, like cleanliness is important and safety is important. And not that like I'm afraid of my own people, but you want to be in an environment, you want to be in a neighborhood where you don't have to worry about, oh, somebody breaking into your apartment, right? Sometimes you have to spend several hundred extra dollars to ensure that, you have that sense of security, right? Anything can happen anywhere, of course, right? But I'm just saying, though, I don't want to be stepping outside my apartment and then, what are they doing? Stepping outside my apartment and then have to worry about fucking homeless people or drug addicts just standing on the corner, you know what I'm saying, like fucking doped up. Like, nah, that's on heroin or whatever drugs they use, K2. Like, nah, that's not the business. And I know some neighborhoods, especially some that are predominantly black, you do have to deal with that. But though I do find myself, like I said, often visiting Harlem, right, or going to Flatbush or Fulton Street, Harlem, though, you do see a lot of, like, fucking dope heads. And it's like, it doesn't really bother me necessarily. Like, I don't like to be around just my people, right? It's just a different vibration when I go to Harlem. And you guys see that I'm there a lot. I make videos where I've done, like, walking tours through Harlem. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the summer. And I'm looking forward to some events happening, like, in Harlem, too. One of which is I think it's the African Day Parade. Oh, yes. I already, like, set my calendar for it. I will be there. I don't know if I'm going to vend. I thought about maybe setting up a table vending there. But I will be out there in the mix. So, I like where I'm at. I'm in a good place. Need better food. But, yeah. With that being said, like, there is a lot of, like, commercial spaces, like, that are vacant here in Upper East Side. And it's funny that the psychiatrist on the team where I work at the hospital, he was suggesting that, I could actually open a practice here in Upper East Side where my clientele is predominantly the worried well. I'm like, yeah, I can see that. Well, on that note, I'm going to catch you guys later in this video. Feel free to drop your comments below. If you are a New York native, feel free to share like your perspective on different neighborhoods that you like across New York or you would recommend. Before I actually started my search, I did have a former colleague suggesting different neighborhoods, which was mostly in Brooklyn. So he did suggest like Clinton Hills, and it was like more high-end neighborhoods. I remember Clinton Hills. I think he said Greenpoint. Yeah, and I was just like, okay. But I didn't go with Brooklyn. I did tour some apartments in Brooklyn, but just didn't do it for me. I didn't like the neighborhood. Like, when I'm seeing trash on the ground, it's just, I don't know, filth and just, I didn't want that around me, right? But yeah, it matters, so I like where I live. I'll catch you guys later.